Welcome, everyone. We are proud to present to you All the Shows, the epic episodic podcast where we tell you how we feel about, well, all the shows. I'm Sterling, and I'm here with my wonderful co host of over 25 years.
I'm David, and we're here to talk about all the cool shows.
Indeed. And there's an interesting reason why we've been co-hosts for over 25 years and that's because we've all got a little bit of each other in us. I'm the son and you're the dad, but we are also, good friends and sometimes very rarely we are podcast co-hosts starting today. So,
Yes, and we're both fans. We're both fans of science fiction and comic books and great TV shows and games. And we want to talk about the good ones and the not so good ones and some hidden treasures for you guys to enjoy.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect segue into sort of why we're doing this. This kind of started because I am a bit far away from you. I'm not exactly a stone's throw away. I'm away in college right now and doing some work. But you're back in our hometown, and in every parental relationship, you got to ask the question, when are you going to call? When are you going to talk? And I totally understand completely. And this is sort of our way of talking a little bit, sharing our thoughts as the weeks go on. So, I mean, we're going to be talking about all the shows, but we're also going to be talking about, something interesting we saw that week or, something cool that's happening in our lives. This is going to be all inclusive, and we want to share some of that at least with you, the viewer.
We've had awesome conversations after seeing movies and TV shows for years, and sometimes the conversations go all over the universe and back, and they're just so fun and entertaining. And we wanted to share that with you guys and get your input. When you love a show, let us know about it. If you don't, let us know about it.
Exactly. We're gonna be reading every single comment possible. Maybe not responding to all comments. If there's a crypto scam out there, sorry to say, but we probably won't be mentioning that live on the air. But if you are talking about our opinions, if you agree with them or disagree with them, we will definitely do our best to accommodate to you because every comment means engagement, and engagement means support for our channel, and so we really appreciate it. We're gonna be on as many ways that you can get podcasts as possible, including
Well, including Apple, Spotify, Google, all the places that you find podcasts, you'll find all the shows. And also, we'll have our video version that hopefully you're enjoying our amazing backgrounds on YouTube, where we can also share clips. And we'll share audio clips too. So if you're listening to just the audio podcast, you'll get to sample a bit of the show. And we'll also try and have like a spoiler-free section and then a spoiler section.
absolutely, yes. That is a very good point. I figured that with how excited we are about some movies, we want you to watch the movie. We don't want to spoil the movie for you necessarily, so that's an important part of it too. And we'll have timestamps available so you can pay attention to the podcast both on the visual end and on the audio end, so you can be aware of those spoilers and all that good stuff. Um, Okay. Now there's also a more core reason, which is that we have a deep appreciation for movies, and we both have had that deep appreciation expressed in different ways. Myself, I appreciate it because I remember when I was very young that my dad would take me to movies, he'd take me to TVs, but he wouldn't just take me to any old movie or TV. He would take me to like screenings. He would take me to like where I could see some people. I would get to watch Q&As. And I just a lot of memorable moments. And you'll get to hear some of those fun stories as the podcast lives on. But I've been watching movies and TV shows from a very young age. And as it turns out, I've also starred in a few movies and commercials, which you can find on my own IMDb profile. Very short lived, not nearly as extensive as my co-host.
Yes, Sterling was also in commercials, and those aren't always listed on IMDb. We'll talk a little bit about that inside baseball, how everything works, and we'll also just be fans. Uh, Ever since I was a little kid, I loved comic books and movies and TV shows, and I would collect things, and I would try and find friends that I could talk with them about it, and it eventually became my career. And I've been working in film, TV, video games, and live events for basically my whole life. And I'm kind of a behind the scenes person, but I'm a creator, producer, composer, which means that I can come up with the idea and then bring all the things together to make it happen. And then I especially enjoy writing the music. So, and then, Sterling uh, has just mastered how to read a film, and that's so important, how to get like the most enjoyment out of every second.
Yeah, and I feel like it's also important in this day and age with how the conversations of movies have been changing over the years. There seems to be um, less of an appreciation for the little details, like the cinematography or the music, right? You have YouTube video essays, of course, that are out there that will talk about movies in depth, and those get some views. And you've got podcasts that exist out there that still kind of maintain that authenticity and try and talk about, all types of parts of the movie. But, I also feel like we have some really great conversations about movies that I think are, at the very least, productive to the movie conversation, let's say, and I think that that could be useful to those out there who want a different and interesting perspective than maybe they're used to. So with that being said, I think it's important that we talk about what types of movies we like, and there'll be movies sometimes that we don't like as well. So I think with this being the very first foray into the podcast world, we're actually gonna have this as a series premiere two-parter. So normally we will have a bi-weekly schedule on our podcast, but for this we're gonna have two episodes, one this Sunday and then again the next Sunday, which will because this July is like the perfect time for us to be coming in and doing a podcast because there's been not one but two blockbuster superhero movies, and superhero movies are our thing. We love superhero movies. So there are so many genres of movies that we could talk about and we could tell you, and we could give you a more broad general thing. But I think that if we talk about our top five favorite superhero movies and maybe a couple of five movies that we're not so much a fan of in the superhero genre, that should give you a good enough idea of movies that we like. And who knows, maybe in the future we'll do a special little episode where we'll talk about our favorite movies of all time, or we'll talk about whatever. You'll have to stay tuned for more episodes of all the shows to know that. But that's
So
the
we
thing.
are going to talk about those super fantastic new movies that came out this month, but first we're going to start out with our top town
Top
with our
five.
top 10 countdown.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, you could basically say, yeah, top five. There may be some carryover there, whatever, but five and five making 10. There you go. Um, and yeah, now also I think a very important key piece of any reviewer worth half their sweat is, what is our metric? Now, there's a lot of different ones over the years that you may have seen, thumbs up, thumbs down. You may have seen star rating systems. But, we said to ourselves, why reinvent the wheel? So we're going to do a rating score between 1 and 10. It's going to be 7.5 or 8.5 or whatever. That'll be our max, to not complicate it too much. But that's what we're gonna go with. A 10 being like a fantastic, star-studded, amazing movie that you're gonna never forget. Maybe, perfect. A 5 is like average. A 7 is pretty darn good. It's like a B. And then a 0. We don't talk about the zeros. We don't remember the zeros out of tens, but we have it as an option.
Yes, so let's start with our top 10, your five, and my five, and there might be some overlap.
Indeed. Well, I figured since you're the movie aficionado and the superhero comic aficionado, that you got to take the floor on this one. I'll let you go first with your number five.
Okay, so I have them listed in chronological order, not in how favorite they are, because you could put on any given day any one of them in the number one position or the number five position. I'm somebody whose top 10 has 20 items in it. So that's just
Yeah.
the way I am. So I like lots of things, and I see lots of different ones. And uh, the superhero movie that I really thought in this century really just showed the world what a superhero film could be is Spider-Man 2. The one that starred Tobey Maguire was directed by Sam Raimi, and the villain was Doc Ock. And that was so much like a Marvel comic book come to life on the screen that it was just magical. And I remember, the seat I was sitting in, it was just, a hyper immersive, wonderful experience where it was a great movie, but I also felt like I just, read a great series of comic books too. It was, and that's my standard for superhero movies is that it has to have that same kind of magic when you were reading a great story in a great comic book, and you thought, "Wow, this would be a really good movie too."
Yeah, yeah. It's really hard for us millennials to appreciate, and Gen Z, to appreciate how revolutionary comic books were. Go ahead.
Speak up.
Oh. Yes. It's hard to appreciate just how revolutionary comic book movies became at the turn of the 21st century. Like, I'm just used to it because every other year there's like $1 billion superhero movie that comes out. But that Spider-Man series really put comic book movies at another level. You could kind of argue Superman sort of did that, but that was 3 decades, however many decades before. But like, I think that the Spider-Man films were able to show you that, yeah, there's more to these than just fan service or whatever. Like, these can do really emotional heavy hitting. You can have good music. You can have good a good movie out of a comic book movie. And that's the exact reason why I actually do have Spider-Man, but Spider-Man 1, because it was the very first one. And I kind of like, in my own life, I have reverence for things that are the first. The founding fathers, they came
Mhm.
first. And so, of course, Willem Dafoe's performance was spectacular, one of his best performances, I would say, of all time. And Peter Parker just came to life with Tobey Maguire. And so the acting was just, I think, one of the best pieces of acting in media as well in general. Um, and it was a comic book movie that also managed to keep you entertained the whole time. There was explosions and fight scenes, and then that ending. I don't want to spoil it, but that ending was um really something that if you were just a moviegoer that's just trying to just watch a popcorn movie, that's just, oh, I'm just gonna watch it. That ending scene takes the comic books movie to another level, and you're like, wow, like, this is something. I think you know what I mean when I say the ending, so I don't have to say it necessarily, but the ending of that movie was pretty heartfelt, and it was good.
Yes, that definitely showed that uh, you could take stories that were impactful from the huge Marvel universe and translate them into a movie, and it would work. That the same characters, same story, same superpowers, all the uh, elements that were in the comic books worked on the screen. And that became eventually the secret formula for how to make really successful comic book movies, was to make them like the comic books. And that was really revolutionary because comic books had been looked down on as an inferior form of literature since they first came out, in the 20th century. So to put $200 million into adapting a comic book seemed like an insane idea to people who weren't comic book fans,
Yep.
because they were thought to be like cheap and low quality, and that no one would, be interested in seeing a fancy comic book. But this showed that actually it was exactly what people wanted, and that's what started the whole superhero revolution. Uh, so so Spider-Man 2, and then the next one that really hit it out of the ballpark was The Dark Knight. That was with Christian Bale and Christopher Nolan as the star and the actor, although it also had the incredible performance of the Joker. And that was really important too, because that showed that not just the heroes, but the villains could be like really charismatic movie star type characters. So that was also really important, not only because it was a great movie and it did huge box office, and I went back and saw it a second time and all that, but because it also changed how people made the superhero movies by showing that you could make the villain really interesting.
Yeah, I have so many things I'd like to say about it. I'm gonna keep it brief though, because Dark Knight is actually my number one. So I'm just gonna say I agree 100%, and I'll save my comments for when I get to number one. But my number four is actually a unique one. You may not expect this one. The Incredibles. That was a movie that, funny enough, I feel like did Fantastic Four justice. Like that was sort of the Fantastic Four movie that was the premier one to enjoy. And I really did like the Fantastic Four, even if though they were a little campy and old school. So that was good because it kind of told the Fantastic Four story in an interesting, unique way, even though it kind
Or
of wasn't exactly Fantastic Four. Um, but the other thing is that so kind of what you were saying about how villains are always depicted one way, and it was depicted a little interestingly. Heroes are always depicted as the saviors of society in a way that society appreciates. But this was a movie about how actually the society's trying to stop them from saving the world. And that's like the whole point of that movie is that in spite of the fact that society is kind of looking down on what you could supplant superheroes. The society's kind of looking down on comic books, at least that's my interpretation. Is like society can maybe sometimes look down on comic books or superheroes or whatever. They can come in and save the day, right? They can be helpful and useful, and there was just so many wonderful things. The villain was really compelling in that one too. The villain wasn't as charismatic. It was just a very interesting way to tell a villain story. A story of sort of revenge and how sometimes what you say to people can really impact them in ways you don't appreciate. So I guess be careful. That was kind of the message of that movie as well. Be kind to others because you never know. But and just overall the music and this Michael Giacchino, funny enough, was the composer of the Fantastic Four, and he was also composer of that movie. And I still remember the trumpets blaring when the curtains opened of that movie. Bum 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 bum. It's just like very memorable. So yeah, just that. So but yeah, that was what I would say is that overall good, great uh comic book movie, even though it's animated.
Yes, I have some favorite animated films too, although that's going to get into my honorable mentions section because we only get five. So uh, my next favorite superhero movie, again, these could be in any order, is Captain America: Civil War. And that was the one, if you remember, where it was
Yep.
actually like Avengers 2.5, because the Avengers guest starred in that Captain America movie, and
Yep.
that uh, served as another chapter in Avengers that bridged to the next Avengers movie, and it was just the most perfect comic book movie. It really looked, sound, and felt like a classic Lee Kirby Marvel comic come to life. All of the character interactions and the amazing, stunning visuals and perspectives and the surprising and unexpected superpowers and the characters and the depth of emotion and the interactions between the characters, and that things were way more complicated than it appeared on the surface, and then it would go into wild humor, and it just had that sense that anything could happen, but it was all going to somehow make sense. And so
Yep.
that was great for, like, introducing the Black Panther, and then the Black Panther turns out to be such a popular character that they quickly fast track the Black Panther having his own movie. And of course, that was also Civil War was when Tom Holland made his first appearance as Spider-Man, and that's something we're going to be looking forward to in a couple of years, is Spider-Man 4 with Tom Holland. So Captain America: Civil War. Uh, eh, and well, there's other stories like I could tell about how fun that screening was. We saw it in the Dolby Vision that was brand new at the AMC in Century City, so we got to see like it in a real high tech theater.
Yep. Um, yeah, I mean, what else can you say? It's funny, like we share a very similar number 5, but now we have the exact same number 3. Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I had this movie for a number of different reasons, but I think what it comes down to is that this was a leap in comic book movie quality to a point where we had been building up to the Avengers, right? And so that was like one thing. But the Avengers were all together. They were in a team. But this explored, well, what happens when those heroes don't always agree, right? It's not just we should go left, oh, we should go right. No, it's how do we organize a civilized society? And that was really fascinating, especially as someone who is studying to become a lawyer eventually. To have that in a comic book movie as well, really, I feel is important for the what do you call it, the zeitgeist, or the cultural impact of movies. Because again, like, people kind of, for lack of a better word, sort of disrespected the level of impact that comic books can have on individuals, or said that it was to a detriment of people sometimes. But this was a movie that said, well, heroes are not always going to agree with other heroes. How do they find a way to come to a common ground? Or how do you figure out what's best for an ethical situation? And what and meanwhile, if that doesn't interest you, you can always just pay attention to the awesome choreography, fight choreography, right? You can pay attention to all your favorite heroes popping up, and this
Oh, the
movie,
battle at the airport.
yeah. If you didn't watch the trailer to this movie and you weren't spoiled by it, you would have said, "Oh my gosh, wow, that's so cool. They got this. Wait, what? They got this character too? And oh my god, whoa!" Unfortunately, we pay attention to the trailer sometimes and to the speculation of things, so we knew going in who was showing up. But I imagine if you were a kid, maybe 10, 11 years old, and you didn't know what was going on, and your parents take you to this movie, you're saying, "Wow, amazing! This is so cool. I see all my heroes together in one movie in a way that was different than the Avengers." The first one, in my opinion, anyway.
Yes. It also set a record for the time of having the most superheroes on screen at the same time.
Yeah. Yes, and that's very difficult. You have to appreciate writers have to make each character that's a superhero interesting enough for the audience to care about their downfall or their rise or whatever. So to throw in not just one Avengers team, but a second superhero Avengers team and an additional couple, side characters too, and make them all have impact in some way. You know, it's like trying to have an Oscar award show, and then they have the winners of the best picture show up, and then you've got this whole ensemble come up there. Well, how are you going to fit them all in front of the mic? They all want to say something, right? And that's kind of what those crossover movies, epic crossover movies, have the problem of, and this movie didn't really have that problem. And there are some movies in the not faves who we'll talk about who do have that problem. Now, I also want to mention that this movie, even though it's number three, does have a personal place in my heart because there was a scene where um, Iron Man, Tony Stark, is arguing with Steve Rogers, Captain America, and they're basically discussing the merits of having a surveillance state. We'll say, Iron Man wants to have a surveillance state of AI. I don't think that's spoiling the movie too much. Saying that that was Tony Stark's opinion is that we need to have uh, AI protect society. And Steve Rogers is saying that, we have to face these challenges as, humanly as possible. I think somewhat something to that effect. He says that. And Tony Stark says, well, what happens when a big threat that's even greater than we can challenge faces us? What happens if we fail? And Rogers turns in his classic, uh, how would you even describe it? In his Captain America cadence, we'll say, he goes, "Well, we'll do that together too. We'll fail together too." I mean, like, even though that's somewhat conceding Tony Stark's point because he's one of the most smartest men in the world, and Captain America's not as smart as him, he was still conceding that, you know what, you're right. Like, there may be greater challenges, but we have to face them more ethically than AI may, or, whatever Tony Stark's sort of logic would have been with AI and using robots to defend the world, right? And so that sticks with me. I quote that very often when I talk to people. I quote that concept.
Yes, and those were really dramatic scenes that worked as just pure entertainment of two great actors going at it. And it also moved along the story, and it also had this higher philosophical level. And that's what Marvel Comics had that made them different than all the comics that went before, is that they worked on multiple levels. And now the movies were starting to work on multiple levels too, just like a good movie should, right? It shouldn't just be like, okay, we go from A to B to C and then it's done. No, there should be like, Alfred Hitchcock said that he didn't make slices of life; he made slices of cake. That that it was like really delicious and rich, and
Yeah,
it was more than just ordinary.
absolutely. Okay, well, if we keep talking about how much we love it, we won't talk about all the other ones we love. So,
Yes.
where are you at with number two?
Okay. So again, this is chronological order. So there's Spider-Man 2 in 2004, then Dark Knight in 2008, and Civil War in 2016, and then the very next year, we had Wonder Woman with Gal Gadot, and that was a perfect superhero movie in the DC world. And it had been quite a while since DC had been able to tell a story in the movie world that was a great movie and a great comic book story, and it all worked as well as Marvel had. But this time, they really got it right. Everything from the casting of Gal Gadot to the theme song, Wonder Woman theme got played on the radio, and there was, and people would stream it, and the the World War II story that was woven in there, and the Themyscira, the ancient civilization. All of these different worlds were beautifully brought to life on screen. It was clearly a DC Comics kind of story that was different than the Marvel ones, but still great. And it had their own kind of mythology in it. And the combination of the World War II movie with the superheroes was just beautifully done. So it's kind of like you got uh, three different movies at once. One about these different civilizations colliding, and then about the World War II war movie, and then the superhero epic. So it worked on all those levels. Very fun.
Yeah, it really was a shame to see, the Warner Brothers DCCU, kind of, um they casted, the, some of the, characters so well. Gal Gadot was casted very well, and, there was, Harley Quinn was cast very well. Of course, Superman, I think, was cast very well. Um, and it just seemed like most of the movies that they put out were like, um, popcorn flicks, and when we say popcorn flicks, popcorn movies, we're talking about we're just there to get some popcorn, eat that popcorn, and we have a movie on, it's not.
It's light entertainment.
Yes. Light entertainment, and so a lot of the Warner Brothers DC movies were like that, even though they cast some of the, characters very well. I'm blanking on his name. Superman, I forget, what his name was, uh, yeah, there's been some controversy around that, of course, but, we'll get to that later. Anyway, the point being that I wouldn't put Wonder
Henry
Woman at
Cavill.
number. Yes, Henry Cavill, that's what it was. I'm terribly sorry. I'm the worst with names, but I'm the best with faces. So if you showed me Henry Cavill's face, I wouldn't recognize it immediately. Anyway, um, I don't actually have it at number 2. I have it as an honorable mention because there's so many. Like you said, you're at top 10, you would put top 20. Well, you can only choose, 5 for this purpose, right? To give the audience an idea. So it's definitely in my top 20, and it's not my top 5 though. Even though I do enjoy that movie, and I thought that Gal Gadot was probably one of the best Wonder Woman performances that we have seen. Um and I just wish that they would have done Gal Gadot better by giving her better movies to star in beyond that movie. Because that movie was good, but then when she had to star in, Batman vs Superman and these other ones, it just wasn't as good. Now, with me, my number 2 is actually, it's it might be controversial, but we're just here to tell you our thoughts on movies we like, movies that are good. I actually like Iron Man 1 from 2008. It gets some flack because it's like you're glorifying a eccentric billionaire, and it's got Elon Musk in it, and people kind of say it doesn't age well. But here's the thing. Um Robert
It made
Downey
me
Jr. is
agree.
Tony Stark. Yeah, I know. I'm shaking my head too, Dad. But here's the thing. Um, Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark. Gal Gadot was great as Wonder Woman, but Robert Downey Jr. Brought that character to another level of interest that Iron Man was not really that well known of a comic book character. It was more that he was a part of the Avengers, right? You say, who are the Avengers? Oh, Iron Man. It wasn't really like Iron Man was the star of the show, right? But with this movie, oh yeah, that changed. Tony Stark was the star of the show, and it was so fascinating, that sort of trajectory where, yeah, he was a bad guy billionaire. He was a weapons dealer, arms dealer, but he had a real experience that changed his perspective. And he became as good of a Samaritan as you can be as an eccentric billionaire as he is. But it also showed off his intellect, the fact that he could turn a bunch of scrap metal, and parts of his weapons technology, of course, into this revolutionary technology that helped protect the innocent, right? And it has a lot of good elements to it. The music is great, you know, overall, I felt like it did the character Iron Man justice. Um, and I remember you talking about this at one point where you were saying that Marvel, you know, kind of had a ragtag band of intellectual property heroes that they kind of were lucky enough to scrounge together to make interesting in the Avengers. But it was like, you know, they didn't have the X-Men, they didn't have Spider-Man, they didn't have like these big names in the Marvel universe, so they kind of had to work with what they did. But they turned coal into diamonds, and one of those was Iron Man. And
Yes.
Yeah, it was a good movie.
Yes, and this is one that really it kind of changed the history of uh, the entire motion picture industry because Iron Man began a series of 25 consecutive blockbusters.
Yes.
And the previous longest streak was something like 9 or 10 blockbusters. So they just demolished the previous record for a success, being able
Absolutely.
to uh, make movie after movie after movie that are all high quality, that all are successful at the box office. The degree of success was just phenomenal. And it began with that movie, Iron Man 1, from 2008, which interestingly is the same year the Dark Knight came from. So that was a great year for comic book movies, just like 2025 is. And the uh, the Iron Man formula is something that's definitely worth talking about. But I'll just mention that I did have the opportunity to speak with both Kevin Feige, who is the lead producer for Marvel, and Jon Favreau, who is the director for Iron Man, and who also plays Happy Hogan as a recurring character in multiple movies. And what they worked out was that first, they were going to cast the best possible actor for each role, that they weren't going to try and go for an unknown, and they weren't going to try and save on money because the superhero suit would be the real hero. No, they wanted someone who the secret identity, the person without the powers, would be really interesting and give a great performance. And they've done that over and over and over again, where they've shown that if you get a good enough actor who's cast right for the part, then that helps every other part of the movie work. So, so
Yeah.
that's probably the biggest change. And the other thing is that they also had a formula where they would plan to do reshoots. In other words, they would quote finish shooting the movie, but they had already planned that after they edited everything together, they would see what was working, what wasn't working, and then go back and intentionally fix the parts that weren't working. So often reshoots are considered to be, oh, that movie's not working very well, I had to do reshoots. Not in the case of Marvel. They are doing reshoots because that's what they planned. And this is because Favreau was a brilliant filmmaker, and he understood that doing a comic book movie was kind of a new thing. And some things would work and some things wouldn't work. They were trying them out. So they just made sure that they had a little extra budget. So the things that didn't work, they could go back and fix them. So they did. And I think that the movie holds up really well that way because it shows a bad person or someone who's leaning towards being a bad person being reformed into a good person by the experiences that they went through. And that is a very subtle character arc that you'd expect in a high quality movie. But it's a total surprise to see that in a superhero action movie.
Absolutely. And one small note before we'll have to move on, because we could talk for hours. Just we could dedicate a whole episode podcast to the history of the MCU. But uh, the um, the fact that you had that end credit scene, one of the most legendary probably scenes in the 21st century. I'm putting together a team. Like we had sequels where it was based on that character. It was be Spider-Man, like that would be the character. Um, X-Men. X-Men didn't get X-Men. You didn't get Professor X the movie, and you just would jump right into it. It would just be that. And Batman, of course, they get the Batman trilogy, the Dark Knight trilogy. But this was the first time where, they went mad over at the executives and they said, "Well, yeah, we spent $200 million on these like 5 or 6 other movies. Now let's spend like $400 million on this movie that gets them all together." It's like this smorgasbord of heroes. Like it excited audiences when that it excited me at least for sure. And I'm sure it excited you as well when you see that end credit scene. You're like, putting together a team. Wait, does that mean that we're gonna get Thor, Hulk, we're gonna get, what else did they
Captain
do?
America.
Yes, we're gonna get Captain America. Yeah, they didn't do Hawkeye and Black Widow, but they did eventually later. Um, and so, like, that was, like, so amazing that that could happen. And it was goodness golly, did that pay off for them, didn't it? That gamble, right? Spending all that ridiculous amount of money on everything, and it worked out in spades. Now, I also want to mention, quickly, a point that you made about how the philosophy that they had was get a really good actor and pay them really well, and don't spare on expenses because that's how you get a good quality thing. Well, we're seeing the effects of that now, where now that leadership is slowly changing, now that it's sort of owned by directly by Disney Plus, and we're seeing that Jeremy Renner was actually offered half of what he was offered for season 2 of Hawkeye rather than season 1. And look what happened. He stepped away. And now we don't have one of the best performances of Hawkeye. I mean, I don't think we've ever even had a Hawkeye before then. And it was a really good quality performance. Everyone says it's like the best interpretation of the character of Hawkeye. Yeah, they say it's on the weaker end of characters if you compare it to like Iron Man or Superman or some of these other IPs. But they say that it's a pretty good performance. But now that they're not paying him as much, they're paying him half. Yeah, he's stepping away. Anyway, that was a little insider baseball, but it just goes to show that their philosophy was correct. It's an expensive philosophy.
Yes, and that's actually kind of part of movie making is that you really have to invest a lot into making a movie to have a spectacular movie. You can have a low budget indie movie and shoot it on your phone, and that can be effective. But to have something that reaches a giant mass audience of 100 million people all around the world, you need to have very expensive things. And uh, that actually kind of leads into my next choice for a favorite of Avengers Endgame. That was the most financially successful movie that had been made up to that time. In other words, out of all movies that had ever been made, Avengers Endgame made over $2 billion, and it set the record for the most money ever made by a movie. Now, it was also an extremely expensive movie. It wasn't the most expensive movie ever made. You give them that. They definitely kept under, being the most expensive of all time, but they still spent hundreds of millions of dollars to make that movie. And it had like 35 superheroes on screen at the same time. So it was a technical tour de force. But what really made it great was that all of these characters came together, like Sterling was saying, that each one had something meaningful, something impactful to do. So it wasn't just a parade of all these characters. Each one was there for a reason, and you could clearly see the reason why they were there, and they had a payoff. They were there for a purpose. You got to see that purpose, and then they moved to the next person, and so on. So uh, It had the most spectacular action sequences, but the emotional stakes were so high too. And part of this is because you, the more you had seen the 24 other Marvel movies, the more you got out of the Avengers Endgame movie. So, yes, you could go in and see it without ever having seen a Marvel movie before, and you could still enjoy it. You just wouldn't know all the wonderful backstories about these characters. But if you had seen some or most of all the other MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, you would get even more out of it because the reason why that character was doing that thing that was important was explained in the previous movie. So
Yes.
you got this interconnected universe, and that had never happened before in the history of movies. That was something completely new, where each movie could stand on its own, but it also had these serialized and a kind of a expanded storytelling that was more than you could possibly fit in any one movie. And this movie paid it off. And that's, I think, why it not only got a place in my heart, but it's also got a place in cinematic history because it showed that you could make a whole bunch of movies that were all interconnected, a web, a transmedia experience that went beyond just one movie. And you could make it work and have people throng to the movie and unprecedented numbers all around the world, and they would get it and they would love it. So yes, there are, the scene where Cap picks up that weapon. I'm going to make this spoiler free. People around the world cheered. They cheered for that moment because they had seen enough of the previous Captain America and Thor and Avengers movies to know that, yes, it was great that he did that, but also it had a symbolic power to it that the movie makers didn't have to explain to you why that
Yep.
was so important because they had
Yep.
already explained that to you in the previous movie. So they could just give you the payoff. So it was one payoff after another. Incredible experience.
Yes. I'm gonna look up the box office here at this point. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, for those who would disagree with the fact that the world was cheering, I've got 2.799 billion reasons why my dad's actually correct on that because that's how much money they made. Think about that. Can you even imagine having $1 billion? This didn't make $1 billion. Can you imagine having $2 billion? I would love to have $2 billion. I would basically become like, God on earth or something. But this movie made 2.799. We'll call it 2.8. Let's round it up. Who's counting anyway, right? $2.8 billion. That's not including all the other movies that came before that or after. So it's clearly grabbed onto the social consciousness at this point. And it started from a very humble end credit scene um, from Iron Man 2008. So that's why I like Iron Man as number two. But it's tough. Man, I wish I could put Endgame at number one, but again, there's just so many choices. I figured I'd put in Civil War there instead of Endgame, but yeah, that's definitely an honorable mention. I would say it's number six, and Endgame is number six for me, but really close. Um, and there's also a really wonderful quote by Steve Rogers in that one, and there, I think it was that movie. I could be wrong. I'll put an edit if I'm incorrect. But in any case, it reminds me of that quote that he says, if even if it wasn't there, where he says, um, they're arguing about sacrificing somebody. They say, well, if we can sacrifice this person, then that will help us, and it'll make our jobs a lot easier as superheroes. And once again, in his Captain America cadence, he goes, "We don't trade lives." Very matter of factly, very to the point, and, Captain America had always been the sort of moral consciousness of the Avengers, and that scene that you're talking about was that sort of, crescendo, climax of all of the things that he said and all the things that he did, and that moment was like that turned to action. But I also quote that scene, "You don't trade lives," we have to live better than what we may cynically think would be easier, or cynically, hope is easy is going to, solve our problems. He was able to, and it's easier because he's got the super serum, right? It's easier for him to say that than us regular humans, but he can speak on behalf of humanity in a way that was really special, and that was a quotable moment. So, like I said, I don't remember if it was from that movie exactly, but it was one of the Avengers for sure.
Yes. Well, uh, Captain America's greatest superpower is he has an infallible moral compass. He always knows the right thing to do.
Yep, I am correct. It was, Infinity War, in Endgame. Yep, so I am remembering that correctly. Um, but it was the first of the 2 parts, not the Endgame one. I consider them 2 movies, I consider it like Avengers: Endgame Part 1 and Avengers: Endgame Part 2. Um, but you're right, Endgame is probably the better of the 2, but even still, like, that's a memorable quote. I also wanna say, that scene where he, is, when Thanos is challenging Captain America because Thanos believes that might is right, and Thanos is, he says something to challenge Captain America, like, and what army do you expect to use to stop me then? And you suddenly pan to this just yeah, epic, one of the most like memorable moments in movie history of all time. Definitely the most memorable Marvel Cinematic Universe moment. I mean, they need to plaster that on every single, intro of every Marvel movie, and I'm pretty sure they do in their intro where they pan out and they show Wakanda, they're coming. And then the Doctor Strange school, they're coming. And then you've got all of these, D-list superheroes that you don't remember. Okay, they're coming in. And I bet you the Defenders are somewhere in the back over there in the crowd. I don't think they did. They were, but the Defenders from the Netflix movie. But, you got all these superheroes coming together. And what does Captain America say? Avengers.
Assemble.
And it's just like, wow,
And the
amazing,
audience cheers
you know?
because they earned that moment over all the other movies that phrase meant something, and then each time it meant something more, and then finally the most meaningful moment.
Yeah, and of course, Thanos was a amazing villain, one of the best villains in movie history. I would say arguably in movie history. I know it's controversial because it's a superhero movie, and, all the hoity-toity critics, kind of try and put that into a different category, and make it very difficult to put superhero movies at the same level of, I don't know, Godfather or something like that, but
But
that
Josh
performance from
Brolin was great.
yeah, that performance because, yeah, he's really stupid for his plan, but you understand why. He's been through so much pain, and he's almost depressed. He's a depressed villain. He's sad to be a villain. Most villains that are thriving in being a villain. They like it, but it's sort of like if you had caught him before he had gone mad, he may have been, an Avenger himself if he hadn't gone mad, the Mad Titan they call him. But yeah,
Yes.
that was a
And
good movie because of that as well. Okay, I think we've spoken ad nauseum. Like I said, we could do a whole thing about the MCU, but we must end with the last but not least, the number one movie of all time for me, which is The Dark Knight. Now, every time I go and see a movie with my pops, one of the common themes I have, criticisms for a movie, and I know it's unfair for a superhero movie, but one of the things I always say is, "Oh, well, that wasn't really a realistic thing for that person to do or say, or that wasn't really a realistic plot line, or realistic this, realistic that." That's a big thing for me in movies is my suspension of disbelief. And I have a pretty high one for superhero movies. But you know, you in the audience know, my co-host here knows that there are times where the writer makes the character a little bit less, intelligent than they should be. Um, there's a famous quote that Stanley says, where he was asked all the time, well, who would win in a fight, Hulk or Iron Man? Who would win, Thor or whoever? And he says, whoever the writer says would win. And it's like, well, yeah, that's true. And so it's sort of like, well, who's the smartest? Well, whoever the writers say is the smartest. And so, but every time you watch a movie, there's always something in your back of your head sometimes where you're like, man, that's not a realistic approach to that. Um, The Dark Knight did that in so many fantastic ways. Everything felt like, wow, like this is a superhero movie, not just come to life, but in my life. Like, wow, that could have happened in New York. Gotham was basically, you could say it's New York City. Some say it's Newark, New Jersey, but the Gotham that Christopher Nolan wrote and directed felt so much like the real life. And it's hard to do that with a superhero movie because, for example, Superman is like one of the most powerful beings in the universe. Some random mobster, some mafioso, some Tony Soprano person is like nothing, that's like pathetic. That's a pathetic villain, right? Um, but what made The Dark Knight so amazing is that the Joker villain is so great that he's like, well, I'm going to turn the mafia into a formidable villain. I'm going to make these things very interesting for the city to deal with, but also for us as the audience to watch. And of course, it felt like if an eccentric billionaire was trying to be a superhero in his daytime, where they show him when mending his wounds, and they show that he has to be very careful in his business, trying to, I guess it's a spoiler, Bruce Wayne is the billionaire, is Batman. Uh, but he has to carefully maneuver the fact that he is a billionaire, and he can't just eccentrically spend. He has to kind of maintain his identity. So it's like, well, his stuff is a secret sort of black site, or what do they call it, slush fund of his Wayne Core business. You can question things, but they even have scenes where people do question that. And there's this awesome scene where Lucius Fox, one of the advisors to Batman, is confronted by someone who, let's just say, is trying to defeat Batman in a interesting way. And and Lucius Fox has this scene where, played by Morgan Freeman, great actor. It's such an ensemble cast, but Morgan Freeman is like, "So you're telling me that you've discovered that this multi-billionaire goes in the middle of the night in uh, a bat suit to beat up criminals viciously, um, and also is one of the most powerful men in the world, and you're trying to blackmail him?" And it's like, well, yeah, so yeah, that's why Bruce Wayne keeps his identity, is because, not only is he very intelligent, but also it doesn't really make sense for people to potentially release that, because he could beat him up. But that's where the Joker comes in, and he's really trying to figure out who Batman is, right? And that's one of the big parts of the movie, is will he figure out who Batman is and expose him to the world? Um and just the portrayal of Joker as a concept of a villain. I don't know what I'm doing. You think I'm a man with a plan? I'm just a dog chasing cars. I wouldn't know what to do with it if I caught one. So many quotable moments from that movie. I could go on, but I'm just gonna simply say everyone, everyone did excellent. in that movie, and it is one of the few movies I say is a 10 out of 10 movie. And yeah, it just it was one of the greatest Christopher Nolan movies he did, even though it was a comic book movie, kind of away from what he usually traditionally does. Um, my goodness, am I glad that he did do that? He took a risk and went into this. Um, and uh and you mentioned how the Joker performance was really compelling, and there's a story, an anecdote where he locked himself in his hotel room and he just scribbled mad writings in his journal. And it wasn't until later that we saw those writings later on, but like he did method acting in a way that actors want to be, but usually fail in and look kind of cringe and corny. But like he really embraced the role of Joker in this movie, and it just goes to show you that comic book movies, once again, can be compelling and realistic and interesting, and uh, and I just love it. I love the crime theme that it has going on. I love Batman. Batman was one of my favorite, superheroes. Um, what can you say? So yeah, one that definitely is my number one, Dark Knight.
Yes, well, that's on my list too, and any one of them could be number one. They're all like equally good because they're all great and different. There's no two that are really alike. And I could easily list others that are just as good. And so I'm going to quickly mention some honorable mentions here. One of my honorable mentions was Iron Man, which we already talked about, which is just as good as the other five that I mentioned. And then another really important honorable mention is Superman 1978. That was the live action superhero movie that really showed that genre could exist, that there could be such a thing as a superhero movie. There had been attempts before, and you can actually see those movies, and that, we could talk about that for a while. But the Superman with Christopher Reeve, directed by Richard Donner, and with the iconic score by John Williams, that was the first superhero movie that was a blockbuster hit. It was beyond just being successful. It was like the biggest movie of the year, and they immediately put sequels into production, and uh, that started like that first age of DC comic book movies, where we got the Michael Keaton version of Batman, and that went on for several Batman movies with changing Batman and all that, but that was all started by Superman, and it's very different than almost any of today's superhero movies because uh, they played the comedy as laugh out loud physical comedy. So even if you don't like to watch older movies that much, this one is really a laugh out loud comedy that has a lot of great action sequences in it. And the closest thing we have to that in our modern era is the Ant-Man movies, where Paul Rudd, who's a comedian, is playing the hero, and there's a lot of comedy in that. So that first Superman movie is really exciting, really well done, and it really is why we have superhero movies today, because it showed that you could have a massive hit, worldwide massive hit from a Superman movie. Uh, and then I'll just mention one more honorable mention is my animated entry is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. For me, that was a revolutionary experience. I had never seen any animated movie like that, let alone a superhero movie. The way that they took drawings that were lifted from the comic books and then added animation techniques to it, and then added experimental techniques to it. And every frame had something cool and interesting going on that you hadn't seen before. And the whole idea that you could have multiple Spider-Men and alternate worlds and all of these far out ideas from the comics, they packed into that movie, and it was a success. And it's interesting that each successive animated Spider-Man has been more successful than the one before because the word kind of is spreading. But it all began with Into the Spider-Verse, and really highly recommend it. Even if you're not a fan of animation, you might really dig this because it's a great visual spectacle and it's a really exciting, unexpected superhero movie.
Yeah, I'm right with you there. Into the Spider-Verse is definitely in my top 20, and it is an honorable mention for me. I think I mentioned them briefly, but I'll mention it once again. The Avengers: Infinity War, Wonder Woman, and then we also have the other Spider-Man, the third Spider-Man, the one that it's in the MCU with Tom Holland. Spider-Man: Far From Home, the one where it's like multiverse is coming in and you have Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield all showing up. That was really fun. Um, and this might
Amazing.
be controversial, um, but I actually think Deadpool and Wolverine gets an honorable mention as well because the thing about most of the comic book, movies is that most people don't care about the insider baseball. The reality is they see a good character, they like a fun character, and they're going to enjoy the movie within that. And then you have many big fans who are wondering, "What's the next one gonna be? What's gonna happen?" And, they don't care as much about, like, which studio owns what. They're just like, "Figure this stuff out and give us the what characters we care about," right? But Deadpool and Wolverine did something really special, and that was that they gave a homage to the Fox superheroes, that, yeah, they weren't really that good, but you gotta, again, understand that the Fox movies were coming out at a time where superhero movies were not really as well appreciated. They were trying to figure out what audiences would like about superhero movies, and those movies were not as good because they were trying to fit in with, like, other action movies of the era, and they didn't really follow in the footsteps of Spider-Man at that time. It took Kevin Feige and a couple other people behind the scenes to really change that persona, that perception, whatever you want to call it. But each of those characters, Blade, the Fantastic Four series, the Deadpool, and then the X Men, uh, they were an important story. They were an important part of what made the MCU we know today successful. And so Ryan Reynolds did something to honor them, and that was they included a smorgasbord of them. I'm not going to spoil it. I'll let you watch it, but just know that if you had some level of appreciation for the Fox era, then they give you that here, and that was really nice that they did that, and that was sort of course, the foray into now the X Men slash Avengers sort of crossover that's going to be happening very shortly. We don't know when, but it's going to happen at some point, I'm sure, and we will do a podcast episode about it when it happens. But that was a fun one. And I know people don't like the Deadpool comedy because it's very raunchy and, what do you call it? Lowest common denominator type comedy. But, you know, it was funny,
Hey,
in my opinion.
it was funny, and they laughed all the way to the bank. It was the most successful R-rated movie of all time.
Exactly. So, at the end of the day, these movie studios speak in Benjamins. They speak in bottom dollars. Bottom dollar speaks loudest. So, it may not be the best quality top 5 movie, but like I said, it does deserve an honorable mention. I would also say that the very first X-Men deserves an honorable mention because Ian McKellen was fantastic as Magneto. Professor X was fantastic. Or I'm sorry. What's his name? Patrick Stewart.
Professor, yeah.
Yeah, Patrick Stewart as Professor X was really something, really awesome. Like the casting was really great. It's just the writing was kind of meh. But I still thought it was a pretty good X-Men movie, especially for that time. So that very first X-Men movie was pretty good. That deserves an honorable mention. And I think that that's pretty much it. I mean, we could go on and on about honorable mentions, but I think that gives you a good baseline. So, we've told you about some of the shows, not all the shows, but some of the shows that are in the superhero genre that we enjoy. So, I think that this leads us perfectly into our very first movie review, which is Superman 2025. Now, this is coming in at a very interesting time for the DC cinematic universe, which we'll talk about at the end. But to keep it brief, people did not feel great about the Superman genre, the Superman IP as of late. There's been some creative decisions that were kind of making fans feel not great. And so James Gunn took over. And now we have this kind of new iteration of the Superman movies, separate from the Warner Brothers era, which had Henry Cavill star. Um, so, why don't you tell the audience what you were feeling going into this movie? Did you have high expectations, low expectations? Like, what were you feeling about Superman 2025?
Well, I was a James Gunn fan, basically since he did a terrific job with the first Guardian of the Galaxy movie. That was a surprise hit where these were characters that uh, most people had never heard of, even if they were superhero fans. And here he introduced a whole bunch of them, and the movie was just delightful, funny, action-packed, unique. So I've been a James Gunn fan, and I knew that he was going to bring something fresh to Superman. And when I first saw the trailers of it, I was kind of on the edge because it looked like this was going to be a more gritty, edgy Superman, and we kind of already had that with the Snyderverse. Uh, but then I changed my mind because one of my friends wanted to go, and then we ended up going to see it, and I am so glad I did because it was terrific. It's one of the best Superman and superhero movies ever. It really just picked you up from the first frame and took you flying to the last frame, and there was lots of unexpected twists and turns. It looked amazing, great cinematography, great production design and costumes. The actors were wonderful. The dialogue was entertaining. There were comedy moments and action moments and drama moments, and all these different things that make a movie a movie where it's really spectacular. And I especially loved the way that the John Williams theme was arranged for 2025 in a kind of trailerized yet punk rock version of the theme that really just took those high points and drove them to the highest possible point. And so it was really wonderful movie making. And uh, so, yeah, I'm going to see it again.
Yeah, I grew up with a really bad impression of the uh, DC universe. It was pretty. What would you say? It just felt depressing every time you would go and you would see a DC centric movie, and it's kind of odd for me to say that when my favorite movie was The Dark Knight, but there was a tinge of optimism in the Dark Knight. You know how society would come together and try and help out and stuff like that. But when it came to the DC universe, it was like everything's sad and you should be sad and there's no hope and the only hope left is to do sad things. We have to do sad things to have hope in our lives, and it was really tragic to see that Superman in Man of Steel, Superman, um Man of Steel, Superman did something very depressing and very sad that really was meant to change your perception of Superman for the entirety of the Warner Brothers cinematic universe. It wasn't an accident. That was an intentional creative decision. And as it turns out, I think we can both disagree. You and I both kind of disagree with the creative decision of what they did. And so coming into this, I was thinking to myself, this is James Gunn. He did Guardians of the Galaxy. This is going to be too wacky. This is going to be too crazy. This is going to be too happy. We're going to go on the opposite end of the spectrum. And so, they're going to yo-yo us to another side where we're not going to have any emotional heartstrings being pulled. It's going to be too wacky kooky, right? Right. I did not see the trailer because I try not to get spoiled on things, too much these days. Trailers usually end up doing that for you. So what I did know was that James Gunn was involved, that it was going to be a completely new revamp of the DC universe. And I also knew that Lex Luthor would be the bad guy. And that interested me because Lex Luthor is one of my favorite villains. So having said that, I had pretty much, I would say, middling expectations. I don't expect it to be very great. I don't expect it to be bad. I just don't expect it to be as good of a movie as I would hope to be for an IP as impressive as Spider-Man or as Superman. But I went and saw it, and it exceeded my expectations very greatly. It's funny, we were gonna go into the about to see the movie, and it was opening night, premiere night, and the movie theater we were going to usually isn't as like there isn't as much spectacle going on. People are going in to get their concessions, at the concession stand, and they're just shuffling into the movie, and that's pretty much it. But here, there was like all this promotional stuff going on. I'll post some visuals here for those who are watching on the video. We saw a cosplayer, and we saw all types of things going on. Real and there were so many people in this movie theater, more than we're used to for an opening night. So I was like, okay, now I'm feeling a little bit better about this. And like I said, when I walked into the movie, wow, it was so good. And I'll talk about our specific reasons why in the spoilers section. But what I will say is it does well on all cylinders. I think the reason for that, as I made a comment to my dad about this just as we were leaving the theater. Um, this felt like what people who stand in the Hall H lines at San Diego Comic-Con, this feels like if you walked up to them and did a man on the street interview and you asked them, "What would be the best Superman movie? Like, what would you want out of it that would make it really good?" And James Gunn said, "Yes, let's do all that the fans want," but did it strategically and well and good. I wanted to keep watching this movie because I'm like, I'm engaged. I want to know more about how they're doing this interpretation of Superman. And There's a lot of important themes, good themes, some controversial. Like I said, we'll talk about it in the spoilers, but uh, it really did a good job of um, talking about the character of Superman, and really made you think as well. It wasn't just exciting, but it made you think, and that's what you want a movie to do. You want that movie to stay with you, and you say, "Well, I wonder what this or that or the third, right?" Um, Visuals were fantastic, and the characters that they chose to include in this movie were great. Nathan Fillion did a great job, and there was a surprise, what do you call it? Standout performance from Edie Gathegi. I hope I pronounced that right. Who plays Mr. Terrific, and he was a wonderful addition to the ensemble cast, and he did such a good job. All the characters did great, but I just wanted to give him a highlight because I didn't even know who Mr. Terrific was, to be honest. I'm more of a Marvel guy than a DC guy. I didn't even know who Mr. Terrific was, but he made me want to look more into it. So, yeah, I'll
It
talk more
might
about
be
that
a
later.
terrific movie.
Exactly, a terrific movie. So I mean, Uh, uh, I think we should give our ratings towards the end. At the spoilers. If you'd like to hear our full ratings, we will say it towards the end of the spoilers. But I think now is a good time to transition to the spoiler section. So avert your eyes and close your ears for just a moment, and you can skip ahead. We'll have it time stamped, and we'll give you our final verdict, final rating of the movie at the end of the spoiler section. So, without further ado, let's get into the spoiler section. Okay, that's the music going on. Without further ado, let's get into the spoiler section. Okay, that's the music going on.
Yes, yes.
We'll
Well,
transition.
we're going to segue and okay. Well, uh, this may not be a big spoiler, but one of my favorite things in the movie was Crypto. The super dog
Yes.
was super fun.
Uh, so we're in the spoiler section right now, right?
Yes.
So remember what I said about the fact that like this felt like Hall H Comic Con fan, a fanboy kind of who like on all of their ideas trying to make it in the movie form. When was the last time you remember Crypto in a live action superhero movie? Do you even remember? I don't, but it was a staple in some of the animated movies of Superman. And it's just a fun, lovable part of the Superman IP is Crypto. But the problem is it doesn't get used as much because um, I guess, it's hard to make a movie about superheroes and then throwing in a, sentient super dog without it feeling really corny or cheesy or whatever you wanna call it. Um, but James Gunn, he did it. He made it work. And funny enough, he somehow made crypto a very important part of the movie. Not just a gimmick, right? But, like, he saves the day at the end of the movie. Crypto saves the day.
Yes.
Not something you would expect, but it is something that's like very much sort of fan oriented, and it's not a bad thing that it is. Usually, if you do fan service like that, it's bad, but it actually worked out very well.
Yeah. Crypto, I don't think has appeared previously in a live action movie. He's been in the uh, animated shows since the 60s. So Crypto has been a popular character in animation and in the comics, but I think this might be the first time he's on screen in a live action movie.
Yes, um, and of course, Nate.
Okay. He was also in the one of the TV series too. I mean, live action TV series.
Yeah, but that was in the '90s, right? That was like decades ago, right? Something like that.
Hmm.
He may have been in Smallville, as well, but not as like an actual super dog, but just as like a dog. Um, But in any case, I digress. The point is, you have not seen crypto done complexly, we'll say, in the same way that they do here, where
Well, they made him a photoreal dog that could fly.
yeah. Well, I mean also the fact that crypto is sort of immature and like kind of like not really acting very whimsical. And then at the end,
The
the dog gets serious and
misbehaving
saves the day.
dog. He's
Sorry, say again.
an obedient dog. He's like a rambunctious, misbehaving dog.
Yes. Yes, exactly, and that's sort of the butt of the joke, right? That's the comedy relief. And that can be a problem in a movie, but they balanced it out just enough here that it works out. They also do something interesting with Superman, where they make Superman um very emotional, we could say. Very much passionate. And that's happened before. Um but, we have this really wonderful scene with Lois Lane where, and this is basically the whole sub what do you call it? Subtext, the moral of the story, the subtext of the movie, where he stops a belligerent dictatorship from invading a sovereign nation and committing a genocide. And he basically tells the dictator, "Hey, stop, or I'm going to blow up all your tanks. I'm going to beat you up, and I'm not going to kill you, but I will make your life a living hell." And Lois Lane says, "Well, who are you to step in on these geopolitical issues?" And there's this really good moment played by, oh, I need to grab their name.
Rachel
I'm blanking on it.
Brosnahan and David Cornsweet.
David Cornsweet. Yes, thank you, David Cornsweet. It was a really
Sweet.
interesting. Yes, and and he says, "Well, what was I supposed to do? They were gonna get killed. People were gonna die." Um, but he does it with this great sense of moral obligation and this duty. People were gonna die. Um, and so what this movie really is about, I feel like, is it's less about the powers of Superman and seeing how great Superman is, but it's like, um, in a complex world, how does a man like Superman fit into it? Um, how can Superman, with all his great powers physically, deal with the emotional and societal challenges of being, the great Superman? And Sometimes in movies, they get that really wrong because they sort of make you, uh, uh listen to, like, the, philosophy for too long, and you kinda get bored and you tune out. Um, and then you have it on the other end where, there's not enough challenge, where they just kinda hand wave and they just kinda succeed, because they are who they are. They're a superhero and whatever. But they strike a really good balance here, and it's up to you as the audience to decide, was what Superman did ethical or the correct decision? We can answer for you if you want, but we encourage you. I mean, since it's a spoiler, I guess you've already seen the movie or you don't care about it, but you know, it's up to you to decide based on the ending of the movie, if what happened was the right course of action. I know we're kind of going out of order here from the order of the movie. So I think the best thing I should do is I'll rewind here. We'll go back a second and we'll just talk about the plot of the movie objectively. Like, what is the actual plot of the movie? And we'll kind of speed run that. Okay. And feel free to chip in when you would like. But I'm just going to be really brief with it and quick with it. So they establish that Superman has lived on the planet for like 30 some odd years. And he had basically been the top dog. Like, he won all the battles he needed to win. And uh, society felt safe with Superman protecting them. Um, and throughout that time, Superman was inspired by this message that his parents gave him. His parents tell him in his language that you are chosen to you. We chose this planet, and we chose you to be on this planet because you are going to be the savior of the planet. You're going to do, many things that are going to help this planet, and we hope that you will do well. And but the message is a little jumbled, and you're wondering, well, what's the rest of the message? And Superman goes on, and he's very inspired by it, and he becomes a hopeful person and very optimistic, and he tries to be ethical with his powers until a war happens, and he is in this moral dilemma where does he stop the one country? We're just gonna say country one and country two. You know the aggressive nation and the defensive nation. So the aggressive nation is going to try and not only invade the defensive nation, but wipe out their entire, you know, uh, ethnicity, and make way for their own imperialistic country. And of course, Superman says, "I have to stop this." So he goes and he tries to prevent it, and he succeeds. He stops the violence and he tells the president, "You cannot do this war." And of course, the president can't fight Superman, so he says, "Okay, sure." Until a few weeks later, 3 weeks later, when a great challenger arrives. I forget his name. Do you remember their name? This like big,
A Hammer of Moravia, something like
yes,
that.
yes, Hammer of Baravia steps in, and is on behalf of the aggressive nation, and he says, "You must stop interfering with Baravia. We will invade, and you cannot stop us." Right? And the Hammer wins for the first time in like 3 years, or however many years that Superman had been defending. Superman gets defeated, and so he gets sent to his planet. He flies to back to his home base in of what do they call it? Krypton, or
Well, no, it
the
goes back to the
sanctuary,
Fortress of Solitude in
Fortress of
the
Solitude.
Antarctic, or
Yes,
the Arctic,
yes.
you mean.
The Fortress of Solitude was how he was delivered from Krypton. He landed on Earth from Krypton, and the Fortress of Solitude was later built with help from Kryptonian technology and Kryptonian robots and all that stuff. Anyway, um, so he lands there and he's like barely alive. And that's when Crypto the dog flies in. And what I want to note is that what I liked about this is you get right into the action. You don't do these origin story thing where he's in Kansas like they did in many other IPs. Just they give you a quick synopsis of what's happened, and then you're right into it, and you're really spectacular. And then they have Crypto dragging him over, and the Fortress of Solitude in this really fantastic CGI display shows up, and it's like, wow, you're really impressed. Um, and so the robots are trying to get him back to full health, and the way they do that is they strap him on this machine, and the sun, the power of the sun is how Superman derives a lot of his power. So they shine this great magnifying glass of sunlight onto him, and he becomes reinvigorated, and he goes out to fight again. As he goes to fly, we learn that the Hammer of Bavaria is not really, truly the Hammer of Bavaria. As it turns out, the Hammer of Bavaria is controlled by Lex Luthor and a whole team of LexCorp tech bros and tech girls, technologically savvy people who are teaching the Hammer of Bavaria how to challenge him. So immediately, that the Hammer of Bavaria is secretly controlled by Lex Luthor, which is means that Lex Luthor has a vested interest in seeing the aggressive nation defeat the defensive nation. So immediately the plot of the movie is established, right? You don't have to like wonder or it's mysterious. You immediately know this is going to be a movie between Superman and Lex Luthor and how they fight each other with these different battles going on, right? Um,
Right,
and why don't
and
you
it's
take it
a
away from there?
classic comic book kind of confrontation where Lex Luthor tries to use his super brain to defeat Superman's super brawn. And like the way it happens in the comic books, it turns out that Superman actually is intelligent and he outsmarts Luthor.
Yes, and we'll get to that later on through the spoiler section. But why don't you take it from there? So, what happens next when we learn that Luther is behind all this?
Well, it's just a continuing escalation where we learn that Luther is behind it, but he has made lots of friends by selling LexCorp technology. And so even though Superman knows that Luthor is behind all of this, he can't really prove it. And then we also get introduced to the team at the Daily Planet, with Lois Lane, who's played very well by Rachel Brosnahan, and we have the editor Perry White, and then we also have there's other superheroes that are introduced in this, which is like important for the whole new DC universe going forward, because this isn't just a Superman movie. They also are introducing members of the Justice League, which in this movie are called the Justice Gang. That's like the hipper version is the Justice Gang, and then of course we get Crypto, and then at the very end of the movie, there's a wonderful end credits scene that where we're introduced to Supergirl, and she's actually, I think, going to be the next movie that comes up is the Supergirl movie,
Yeah, and we'll
and
talk about
she's
that
not,
in the
she's
insider
not,
baseball section. We'll talk about that.
yeah, and then the battles become increasingly high stake, because Luthor is actually trying to kill Superman, and that turns out to be the reason why he created the invasion, and why he created the Hammer of Boravia. I mean, all of these turn out to just be pieces in Luthor's plan to kill Superman. And I don't want to give it away, but there's multiple battles, and uh, the uh,
Oh, you can give it away.
they split up into teams, and it turns out that Lex Luthor is experimenting with super dangerous technology of creating a pocket universe, and that this could cause the entire Earth to be swallowed up into a black hole, and there's lots of peril and other dangers that are happening, and
Yeah.
we get to see Lois Lane actually kind of do some hero things, which is great, and we see Mr. Terrific, who's part of the Justice Gang, and I think there's going to be a Mr. Terrific movie because people liked him so much. And ultimately, what happens is Superman finally figures out that the way that uh, the way that Luthor keeps beating him is that he's giving the a clone of Superman. See, Luthor has cloned Superman into an evil version, and Luthor is giving that uh, fake Superman all the instructions how to fight Superman. So, with the
Yes.
help of Crypto, they uh, cut off the communication, so Luthor can't talk to the
Bizarro,
clone.
we'll call him. Basically, it's Bizarro. Their version of
Yes,
Bizarro.
but I'm blanking on his real name, and he's a well-established, like
Oh,
evil
Nicholas
clone of
Holt?
Superman.
Yeah, are you talking about Lex Luthor?
No, I'm talking about the evil Superman.
Oh,
Is
David Corn Sweat. Corn Sweat.
David Cornsweet is Superman.
Yeah,
I'm
Corn
t-
Sweet. Oh,
he
yeah, you're
also
right. Yeah, because that missing E
I,
makes me think it's Sweat. Anyway, yes, Corn
yeah,
Sweet.
yeah, yeah. A lot of people do that. So, in any case, uh, the evil Superman is also played by David Cornsweet. What I'm trying to say is that the evil clone of Superman comes from the comics, and almost all of the plot elements in Superman 2025 come from the comics. Sometimes from the early original comics, sometimes from later versions, including comics that have been written in the 21st century. Like Mr. Terrific is a newer character. He wasn't invented until like 50 years after Superman, but they the plot elements are all coming from the comics, and uh, David Gunn and his team of writers and designers are all basing things on the comics. So they've he's learned that lesson from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that the way that you make these stories work is that you base as much as possible, and the story, the characters, the design, the look, this everything about it, you try and base it on the comic books as much as you can, and that's what the audience really wants.
Yes.
And um, it worked again, and it's a big hit movie, and all of these characters and all of the situations that happen, and well, like probably the biggest surprise, it might be that there's a character who's Lex Luthor's girlfriend named Miss Tessmacher. And Miss Tessmacher was actually Lex Luthor's girlfriend in the second live action Superman movie. So, they're paying homage, and more than that, they're updating, adapting the characters from other Superman stories that were good to make this one. But unlike other kinds of sequels, in the superhero universe, you've got thousands of stories about hundreds of characters. So you can adapt things and it doesn't become repetitive or predictable because you've got so many different stories and so many different characters that, unlike a sequel that might just be based on a book or a previous movie or something, you've got all of this like massive library of things that you can draw from, that you can surprise and entertain the audience with and make a really cool story that's already been tested out. We've already seen that people like this story. So it's like when they're adapting a bestseller. Okay, we know that the people who like the movie will, I mean, like the book, will probably like the movie too, or at least go see it, right? But now you can do this times 10 because there's so many more stories by all these great writers and artists. And it's just that movie executives tend to not be comic book people. That was one of the things that set Kevin Feige apart, is that he was a producer, a movie producer, who also knew comic books. And that was just a really rare thing in the movie industry, to have someone in a position of authority who understood why comic books were cool and why people liked them. And that the same thing is happening with James Gunn and the new DC universe, is that they're trying to get back to being like the comic books, and that makes for a better story, a better movie. So, in the end, Superman wins because without Lex Luthor's brain and computers to be figuring out how to fight Superman, the fake Superman is easily defeated.
Yes, because you cannot fake, perseverance and hope, and I think that's what ended up winning the day, in a big way. Obviously, strategically, Superman was smart enough to know how to defeat Lex Luthor's strategy as well, but, he kept fighting on for, what he believed in throughout the movie. Now, um, there are a lot of different points I could speak to, but I guess I'll simply say that there is another surprising part of the movie that, again, it kind of makes moviegoers want to decide and debate. So,
Oh,
the
it's
first debate.
Ultraman.
Say again.
The evil Superman is Ultraman.
Oh, it's not Bizarro. Oh,
Now,
okay.
Bizarro is a different evil Superman from another dimension. So, yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was like, Bizarro is supposed to have like an ugly face and like not look exactly like Superman, but kind of acts like Superman, but or doesn't act like Superman, but has many powers similar to Superman. So that's why I thought that that was Superman. But okay,
yeah.
my fault.
Well, it was. I can see that, and I was kind of wondering that too. But eventually, they explained that it was a clone of Superman, and so then that's when it became, oh, that's Ultraman.
Got it. Okay. Well, um, David did a great performance on both of the mans, the Superman and the Ultraman. So kudos to him for that. And you gotta give him credit because those were some tough shoes to fill. I mean, Henry Cavill was the fan favorite, even if the movie themselves weren't as high quality, or the universe that he was in wasn't as favored. People still said commonly that Henry Cavill was like the big shining star of the show. And so, David did not have an easy job here. Not only do you have to follow in the footsteps of that, but you have to play, a person like Superman, and he did
And
that
Clark
very, very
Kent.
well. Exactly. So, to finish out the plot of the movie, there's this portal dimension that Lex Luthor's using to be very sneaky because he's so intelligent. He can just make pocket dimensions. Scientists beware on this movie because you may not like that he's able to use black holes to make pocket dimensions, but whatever. Suspend your disbelief, I suppose, for a moment. Um, so he is using that to do many different things. Um, and he's holding Superman prisoner in this pocket dimension, and the Metamorpho character, played by Anthony Carrigan, um, is sort of coerced by Lex Luthor to imbue the power of kryptonite to make Superman prisoner. Um, so it looks like Luthor's going to win until Lois Lane and Mr. Terrific uh, come in and save the day. And that's where I want to say that this is one of the huge pros of this movie is the Lois Lane character. The reason that the Lois Lane character existed back in the 30s and the 40s was to give Superman a human damsel in distress, a sort of representation of humanity. Well, he's got to save humanity, so he's got to save Lois Lane, right? But also, it kind of helps the villains because they have a damsel that they can take, and they can say, "Well, you're Superman, you can just beat me up, but I've got Lois, so you gotta be careful there, Mister Superman." But this way is the other way around. And that was really clever. That was really interesting that they did that. So now Superman is the damsel in distress, and Lois has to come in and save the day. Now, the reason that Lois needs to be there is because she's a journalist with the Daily Globe, and she needs to expose, or Daily Planet, excuse me. So she needs to expose LexCorp. And as it turns out, there's this secret clandestine black site on this beach that no one knows about. And so she needs to sort of break the story. And so she comes along with Mr. Terrific to, figure out what's going on here with LexCorp. Because, LexCorp is like the equivalent of like, a very, I don't want to make this too political. So we'll just say that there are many shady secret companies that exist in the real world. And LexCorp is very similar, but there wasn't any proof. So Lois needs to go there and find proof. And there's this really awesome scene that happens as they're trying to save Superman. And there's this montage moment where you show off how OP Mr. Terrific is because there's this entire army that LexCorp has to protect the, pocket dimension that they have where they hold other prisoners. And they have this whole army, and Mr. Terrific cuts through them like butter. And there's this, really cool scene. So eventually they go and they're able to get through, and they are gonna go and try and find Superman. And once again, Crypto the dog comes in to help out because even though they were able to, sabotage the prison through their sort of hacking system that Mr. Terrific was able to do, Superman still needed to make it out of the pocket dimension because what they were doing to break out the prisoners was also causing an unstable situation in the pocket dimension. So they had to get out. So Crypto comes in and saves the day once again, and isn't exactly comedic relief. Actually there and helps out, and brings Superman out in just just as the portal's about to close, boom, saves both Superman as well as what's his name? Metamorpho. So so now, the team is coming together. You've got Mr. Terrific, you've got the Justice Gang, but now you also have Metamorpho, who's a part of the team now. And so there's this really epic climactic scene towards the end of the movie where Superman has to fight a battle on two fronts. He not only has to stop Lex Luthor's portals from becoming too unstable, because
And destroying the Earth.
yes, and there's an epic scene where Lex Luthor says, "If anyone's gonna have the world destroyed by their unstable portals, it's gonna be me," or something like that. And uh, but on the other hand, there's also the Baravians, the aggressor nation, who have used this as a opportunity in the midst of chaos to steamroll the defensive nation and overpower them. Um, so now Superman's left with a choice. Does he go and save the Earth, which means that he'll have to ignore the country? Or does he go and save the country, but then that doesn't matter because we have no Earth? Um, and so as a result of Superman's good actions and good nature, the fact that he's, helped so many people, um, all the people that he's brought together actually come together and help. And so you've got the Justice Gang who well, we have Superman who's fighting Lex Luthor and trying to stop the portals from going too crazy. But then you also have the Justice Gang who come in to save the day. And it's a controversial way, which is they take the president, they grab him, and they just kill him. They just drop him off. They bring him on the air and they just throw him and they,
This is the president of the Moravia
yeah,
country.
yeah, of course. They don't kill the defensive nation's president or the president of the United States. They kill the president of Moravia. Thank you for that important clarification. Um, but it's controversial because like what happened to Superman's code, like where he's supposed to whatever. And we
Yeah,
could
but
talk
he
about it if you
wasn't the
want.
one doing that, right? That was the Justice Gang, and they even have a line saying, "But I'm not Superman."
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yes. You and Superman will not kill me because you have the honor. I'm not Superman. Boom. And they kill him. But people are arguing over the internet, debating over whether that was justified or not. We can do that here if you want, but I believe that the importance of the movie is that you see it and you make your own interpretation. And that's the point of the film, is that you may not like what Superman does, or you may like it, but you are watching Superman handle these really complex social, political, and physical issues. He's not just a big brute that has a bunch of powers. He also is a geopolitical ambassador, you could say, trying to do what he can to help Earth and humanity. Now, there's one other thing that gets revealed towards the end. It's like Lex Luthor's sort of card up his sleeve, and that is that he's decrypted the uh, Superman message from Krypton. And it turns out that the parents actually saw Earth as a colonial opportunity for colonialism. They sort of say that you are going to be the dominant species, you're going to control everybody, and we need you to. Basically, if you've seen Man of Steel, they basically tell him to do the plot of General Zod and what he tries to do. You are going to take over Earth and you're going to rebuild Krypton in your image. But you're going to have to kill everybody to do that. And this really makes Superman think like, man, was what everything I fought for really mean anything if that's what my parents wanted for me? Because I saw their message and they were telling me nice things, and it turns out it was actually really bad. And he makes his actions speak louder than his words. And he saves the day and does all these nice things, even though his parents don't want him to do that or whatever. The parents see Earthlings as peons and whatever other terms you want to use. Um, and so it also deals from that perspective, like when your parents are full of sin, how do you handle that? How do you move forward with that? And so
Well, there's Ma
yeah,
and Pa Kent. There's his adoptive parents, and that's
yes,
where his good nature gets nurtured and encouraged. Is these normal humans who are trying to raise Kal-El? That's the Krypton name for uh,
yes.
Clark Kent or Superman. Like he's a normal, good person.
Pruitt
And it
Taylor
turns out that
Vince.
that's more important than where the planet he came from was.
Exactly. Thank you for bringing me back on track. Pruitt Taylor Vince plays Joe Kent, and I would say this is one of the best superhero. Like, if you put it like top 100 like best superhero movie moments, this would definitely go on there somewhere. I don't know where. I'm still trying to figure that out. But you would put that scene where Joe is this humble farmer. He's a rancher. And Superman's coming to him with all these like complex geopolitical problems and how do I handle this? And my parents and Joe is so, yeah, Pruitt Taylor Vince just does such a good job of having this expression on his face, like, oh, silly you, you know, um, you aren't your parents. You're who you are. You're who you make yourself to be. And, you have this. I'm butchering the quote at this point, but basically, he explains that Superman is his own man, and he's done so much good with what time he's had on this earth, and that's what he should be remembered for, and that's what he should be proud of. Um, and it almost brought a tear to my eye. It almost did, that scene, but yeah. So James Gunn knows how to pull those heartstrings, and that was the moment that I knew this is a really good movie that beats my expectations. Because remember, I was thinking it's just gonna be a silly, like peacemaker type movie or whatever, Guardians of the Galaxy. No, this was not that at all. This had very much a lot of depth and complexity, and that was cool.
It also had
So yeah,
comedy and terrific action and a lot of surprising twists and turns. I mean, I can see why he wanted to direct this movie because it gave him a chance to do a lot of really interesting things, right? Uh, that that weren't just superpower scenes, right? Like that scene with Clark and his parents. There's no superpowers, there's no special effects. It's just really good writing and acting.
yes, absolutely. Lois Lane knocks out of the park. Usually Lois Lane is portrayed very much, like I said, damsel in distress, but she had a confidence about her that Rachel Brosnahan, there we go,
And yeah,
Rachel Brosnahan brings to that role, where she challenges Superman, and really makes him think. Um, and it was really something, that scene where they're having a philosophical debate about the merits of involving himself in geopolitical issues, and that was really cool.
yeah,
Nathan
she's
Fillion,
like
of
a
course.
real reporter.
Yes, yes. Did you have any thoughts about her performance? Or
Well, I thought she was excellent. Definitely the best Lois Lane since Margot Kidder and 78. She really set the standard. And I actually got to meet Margot, and she was a really interesting, thoughtful person. In fact, she was more like the way that you would want Lois Lane to be than the character that she played in the movie, but she played it beautifully. Uh, this time, uh, Lois Lane got to be more like a real reporter, and she also became a heroine without superpowers, just with courage and intelligence. Uh, so that was really well done. And overall, I mean, there are things that they made work. Like there was a battle sequence on a football field, And you could see that that would be kind of corny or lame, but the way that they did it was actually really exciting and it was cool. They used that location to great advantage to make for an interesting action sequence, putting it in a stadium. So uh, at at some point, you're either going to like it or you're not going to like it. But I would say that there's so many things to like about this movie that I want to see it again, and yeah, that's unusual for me. Uh, Sometimes I'll watch a movie a second time by, chance if it happens to come on streaming, but usually I have a good memory of movies that I like. But this
Yep.
one I enjoyed so much I wanted to see it again. And the same thing is true for Fantastic Four 25, which was really amazing. There was two movies in a row that were so well done that I wanted to see them again in a movie theater because they were spectacular and really like great movies.
All right. Now we've glazed this movie. We've said so many wonderful things, and there's so many more things that we could say. But for the sake of brevity, we're in agreement. This is a really, really good movie. However, this isn't a perfect movie by any means, and there are some flaws to it. I'm going to share a big con that I had of the movie. Maybe you don't have any cons yourself, but I'll just say that. Um, the, um, the fact that, Superman, has such great power, makes it very difficult to, make the challenge believable. Um, and, for me, as much as I like the Lex Luthor character, um, the thing that James Gunn tried to do to make the great challenge is, well, what happens if Lex Luthor's madness goes to his head and he goes wrong and he, the portals that he builds blows up the earth, and all that stuff. His science goes wrong, we'll say. Um, but here's my problem with that core premise is that Lex Luthor is so illogical in his hatred for Superman that he would rather burn the earth and kill himself and get killed. Uh, and they mentioned that, yeah, he has like a spaceship or whatever, but like, where is he gonna live? He's only gonna have like what, like 3 years of food in his ship before he, may potentially die or something. Like, it's just, uh, they needed to give Superman a great threat, so challenging that really puts you at the edge of your seat. So I recognize the challenge of that, but I also have to sit there and say, did Lex Luthor have to be that weirdo, crazy guy that's like Joker levels insane and goes, "Oh, I'm just gonna blow up the whole Earth"? I mean, Lex Luthor is like a real estate mogul that, like, has great reverence for Earth, and like, the this Lex Luthor that I know, at least, maybe you disagree, but the Lex Luthor I know believes that he should be the protector of Earth, not Superman, and that he needs to kill Superman so that he like becomes president and becomes like, God King on Earth. This is not the Lex Luthor I know from that perspective. Now, I'm not saying that Nicholas Hoult did not do a really good job with what he was given. He was knocking it out of the park, and in some ways, he kind of stole the show. Especially that scene where Superman comes in with great rage and he's throwing the room around, and Nicholas Hoult very calmly sipping his his mug and all that stuff, acting very smug. And there's many moments like that. But to say that Lex Luthor would blow up the whole Earth just to kill Superman, I don't buy it. And it really made me wonder if this plot line could have been saved for, I don't know, Darkseid, you know? Wouldn't that make sense? Darkseid comes onto Earth using one of these, things. He works with Lex Luthor, and Lex Luthor's, trying to create a threat. And in that, he accidentally creates, so that could be something that happens later on. But this, that was a big con for me, is that plot line. What do you think about that?
Well, okay. Those are things that I'm willing to suspend disbelief. That's part of any kind of art is that you have to take it on its own terms and suspend your disbelief, right? If you look at a Van Gogh painting, well, it's just paint on a piece of canvas. But if you suspend your disbelief, it becomes like, oh, wow, that's a really touching portrait of this interesting person, or that's a really amazing landscape of this beautiful place. You just kind of accept that it's not really that, but if you use a little bit of imagination, then yeah, it can become something amazing. So those issues I had to overlook that, okay, uh, Luther was being too crazy, like you say, the Joker level and insane, and that's really not Lex Luthor. But I accepted that because they were telling a really interesting story, and I could get into the other parts of the story if I just accepted that, okay, Luther is over the top. And I just have to accept that he's going to be over the top for this movie, or I'm not going to enjoy it. That's it, and the actor is doing a really good job of playing him over the top. So that makes it easier to accept that, even though it's not the Luther I expect. It's just like Crypto is supposed to be a very smart, well-behaved dog, usually in the comics, but I accepted that, okay, this is going to be a misbehaving, mischievous Crypto for this movie. And I'll just accept that because they did a really good job of portraying that kind of a dog. So I suspended my disbelief that, okay, this wasn't really the Crypto I knew, or it was different. And the same thing with the soundtrack, right? That, they did this trailerized version of the Superman theme. It does not sound like the John Williams symphonic version of it. But I bought into that too because that was how they were telling this story. And for a rock and roll take on Superman, it was exactly the right kind of music for a more rock and roll Superman.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah.
how I look at those things, is that they didn't take me out of the movie because I accepted that that was okay. And as long as I accepted that that was okay, the rest of it worked. If the rest of the movie wasn't working, then I wouldn't have been able to accept that. And those are the movies that don't really work, right? Where you try and give them a chance, they're going to tell the story their way, and you go along for the ride. Uh, it's really, it's a roller coaster ride, and you get all the way to the end, and it leaves you feeling good and positive. And probably the most positive thing of all is that this Superman is clearly a altruist, a good guy who's helping people because it's the right thing to do. And the conflicted dark Superman isn't part of this movie. So that by itself gives it an extra boost to a level of a great Superman movie, because they're getting back to the true nature of Superman from the very first Superman comic back in the 1930s. That he was helping people because it was the right thing to do. It wasn't because it was his job or that anyone told him to do this. It was because people were in trouble. He could help them, so he did.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair enough. I think that, again, the writers, really did a really good job. It's just I just am only saying that they didn't do a perfect job. That's all. There were, points of criticism that you can levy that are still valid, even if they did a good job, a very good job. You could say,
Oh,
you
sure. I mean,
know,
there's visual effects that some of them were beautiful and exciting, and others were kind of iffy. And some of the humor was coarse, and
yes, yes,
I'd seen the 78 Superman where the humor was all clean, but it was hysterical because the writing and the
yeah.
acting, it was
Well,
just great comedy,
I
and they
I
didn't
actually
have to uh, to go to a greater extreme. They just did a clean version super well.
Yeah. I somewhat agree with you with when it comes to the humor. I actually, though, think it's okay to have it coarse, especially nowadays, like,
Oh, yeah,
we're
this
just
is a
exposed to
modern
more.
Superman. Okay, this is not Superman from 10 years ago or 50 years
Yeah.
ago. This is, modern Superman.
However, we still do come to a problem of the humor, which is that sometimes it, feels too corny, like, the Nathan Fillion character, for me personally, a lot of what he did was great, but they gave him a line where he's, like, arguing about the name of the team, like, "It's gonna be the Justice Gang, and anyone who says Justice Gang is cool with me," or whatever, and it was like, um, it's just there's some jokes there that, like, um they just didn't hit very well because, it's that James Gunn Guardians of the Galaxy style comedy, which I was kind of worried about, and there were examples of that where it creeped in. It didn't take over this movie by any means. Again, I wanna make this clear. This was a really, really good movie, and the humor was great. There were many moments where we laughed, and the audience was laughing. But, the risk of the kind of, what would you call it? Sort of realistic convo, like sort of fly on the wall type of like awkward conversation comedy. The risk of that is that you actually have awkward comedy, awkward like conversation, and awkward jokes that don't really hit. And also like the way that they portrayed the girlfriend. What was her name again? The girlfriend of
Not Miss
Lex Luthor?
Tessmacher.
Miss Moniker. I
No, Miss
understand.
Tess Mocker.
Tess
Same
Mocker.
character name as the girlfriend of Luther from the
Yes.
Christopher Reeve Superman.
Yes, Eve Tessmacher. Now, Eve Tessmacher was funny at times, but there were other times where, they're doing it absurdist type comedy where they're making her like a very like extreme social media obsessed influencer, and it took you out of the movie, and you don't want that in a movie. That type of comedy also kind of was like, "Ew," it
The
took you out of
thing
the movie.
is that that actually paid off.
It
And
did, it did. That's
if
true.
I was on the fence about, her character being too much or corny, whatever, then all of that went away because you realized towards the end that she was doing that deliberately to make people not take her seriously so she could do something very
Oh,
powerful and sneaky and no one would suspect her because they
okay.
thought that she was dumb and over the top and so nobody would even imagine that she would have this complicated plot that she was putting together.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I probably would give more credit to the Jimmy Olsen character on that because, well, my interpretation of it, and like, this is what
Well, I mean,
happens,
all
alright?
those pictures were not accidentally framed that way. Okay. One or two might
Okay,
be. Have a whole series of them. It was
okay,
obviously intended by the filmmakers to show that
okay.
this character was consistently taking all of those social media obsessed moments and using them as a cover for spilling all of Luther's secrets without him having a clue that the secrets were actually being spilled.
There's a saying from you, I think you told it to me. Why don't you tell the audience this then? The Alfred Hitchcock kitchen refrigerator theory. The kitchen refrigerator theory. Do you remember you telling me that?
Probably. I'm a Alfred Hitchcock fan. I'm not sure which one we're talking about there,
Well,
though.
the one where right after a movie, you go to the refrigerator. Does that ring any bells? And okay, well that's fine. I'll retell it and you'll probably remember. So Hitchcock was getting criticism for a plot issue, um, and like the critic used some line to the effect of, "At some point later on, as I was reflecting," and so Hitchcock goes and he says, "Well, I prefer when I'm watching a movie that when I watch the movie, uh, after I watch it, I like to eat a nice good." snack or a meal, something like that. And what I'll do is I'll go to my refrigerator in the kitchen. But right after I see the movie, I'll you know be thinking about what I want to eat. I'm rummaging through my refrigerator to see something, and as I'm going through, I ponder for a moment. I pause, and something in the fridge reminds me, "Huh, wait a minute. Eve Tessmacher wasn't actually, that much of a dumb person. They actually, or the other way, they'll say, oh, well, actually, when you learn that a plot device was actually bad later on, it doesn't count because you liked it during the movie. So my argument is I actually think that logic applies the other way. If you're watching a movie and the plot device is immediately you don't like it and it's bad and your experience is lessened while you're watching it, then I also think the Hitchcock refrigerator theory applies. So you're right, that is a very good defense. And you would not get convicted of a bad plot line in a court of law. But, you know, there was probable cause for me to not like that in the moment in the movie, and that's a con in my
Oh, yeah, yeah,
opinion.
yeah. I'm everybody's going to react to a work of art differently. That's part of what makes it a work of art, is that everyone has their own take on it. Some people might agree on certain parts of it, but they'll disagree on other parts. That's how you know that it's a work of art, is that everybody sees something different in it. So, yeah, if you like this part and you didn't like that part, that's your experience of the movie. And I'll have a different experience, but we can all sometimes agree that it was a good movie. And that's when you have a blockbuster hit, when, tens of millions of people all like enough of the movie. So, yeah, there was nothing in this movie that took me out of the movie, even though there was things that, like I said, I thought that Luther was being too extreme, and I thought Tessmacher was being too extreme, but they paid off because they did extreme things in the service of the plot, which made sense. So I accepted that, even though I didn't like at first that they were doing that, it paid off in a good way. And I liked the movie as a whole. So I'm not going to go out complaining about the things that I didn't like. I mean, basically, that's why I only review movies that I like, because if there were enough things that it took me out of the movie and I really didn't like the experience, then, that movie wasn't for me.
But I wanna make one thing clear. Both of us not only thought this movie was good, but that we loved this movie and that we encourage everyone to go and see it. But,
Yes, and I'm looking forward to the sequel, and I want to see this one
yeah.
again. And
Yeah, I'm just merely being a,
the action is much more spectacular when it's on a really large screen,
yeah.
and they really know what they were doing, and it was filmed for IMAX. So, the larger the screen, the better, because they intentionally made it so the action gets better the bigger it is.
Yeah. So, this is me expressing sort of my negative feelings on it, and you've expressed your negative feelings on it, and I think we've done that plenty. So, now we have finished, we have completed the spoiler section. So now we're going to give our final rating. Once again, for those who don't know, as a quick reminder, we're going to be going based on a number between 0 and 10 being like, Avengers Endgame or Dark Knight level, very high, that's the 10. A 7 being, average, maybe an honorable mention type of movie. Or not average, but above average type movie, honorable mention type movie. 5 being an average, and 0 being no good, no good. So we may not agree on the number, but um I am at a solid 8 out of 10. This is a really good movie. It is better than Man of Steel without a doubt. It is a better interpretation of the Superman character than the Warner Brothers version. So if you didn't like that version, I think you'll at least appreciate the difference here, if not really enjoy this Superman. I would also say that if you are having superhero fatigue, that this is a good one to get back into things because you don't have to rely on going back into the lexicon and, oh, what, weird, end credit scene from movie number 3 in the DC universe did I have to watch to know that this was happening or whatever, right? This is like a fresh start, and if you were kind of hesitant on movies, that are in the superhero genre, this is a good one to give it a second chance. And there's a lot more I could say, but for the sake of brevity, we've gone on for far too long, and we've said many things on it. Final verdict: 8 out of 10. Go see it.
Yes, and I'll give it maybe a 9, an A. That it really was a great movie on its own, and it made me want to see more DC movies. And this is the first time that the DC cinematic universe has done that for me. That I want to see more of these kind of movies with these characters. I understand each movie is going to be different, but this is not only a great movie on its own, but it can whet your appetite for more superhero movies.
Absolutely. And funny enough, this is a great segue. I don't think we'll be able to get to it just today. Time is getting a little not on our side. At this point, we've enjoyed talking so much that we've let time slip by. But in our next
Yeah, we need
episode,
Superman or the Flash to take us back in time with their super speed.
yeah, so we could know, hey, don't talk too much about the top fives, man. You got to be hurry up quick. We had a good time while we were doing it, and that's the important part. And we hope that you guys had a good time while we were doing it too. But we will be.
I had a blast. This was always great to talk about movies and to talk about anything. Just great conversation.
Yeah.
And please, everybody, join in the conversation. We'd love to have you aboard.
Absolutely. And we'll talk more about that in the outro section. But just to cap off, final verdict, Sterling, myself, I am at an 8 out of 10. And my co-host is at a 9 out of 10. What we do agree on, regardless of the nitpicky stuff, whether it's an 8 or a 9, go see this movie. And see it in theaters because we need theaters to know that you like movies like this. Because you can watch it on a live stream and that's one thing. But, we didn't really talk about it in the review, but you should appreciate the fact that you can still go into a theater and get this really massive screen. Sometimes you can go on IMAX, and get this really beautiful picture that you just can't get from your home. Even with the best of best smart TVs, you will not get the same viewing experience
And you
as a
have
theater.
a great TV, but
I do.
it's
It's a
not
smart
as
TV,
good as a
but
movie theater.
I would never in a million years want my first Superman 2025 movie experience to be on the smart TV because there's so much visuals going on. The cameras that they use is better when you see it on the theater. And there's just so many more positives about going to a theater. Now, am I
The
saying?
sound is so much more immersive and rich because you have multiple speakers and you have a big space, and sound
Yeah.
has to be in a space. And the space of your living room is just not as good a space for sound as a tuned movie theater.
Yeah. And you don't have to go to the big stores, the AMC's and the Regal Cinemas and all those. You can go to your local theaters sometimes. They have showings of it and things of that nature. So, we're not necessarily trying to advertise the big theater industry, it's not like we have investments in it or anything. It's just that we're trying to tell you how to have the best possible Superman experience. And we're probably going to say that for most movies that we review because that's just what a theater does is it upgrades the experience. I would say up to a point. I would lose a point if I saw this just in a home theater or a TV screen, just because I wouldn't be able to appreciate the visuals as much and things of that nature. So you can go to matinees even, get it at a discount like we do sometimes. So please do see it in a theater if you can. Now, with that being said, we would have loved to fit all of the shows into one episode, but that's not possible. So, we're gonna do a compromise. So, we did the introductory, top fives, and we talked a little bit about, what we appreciate about movies in general, and we also got to tell you about Superman. But we didn't get to what we were hoping to get to, which was the wonderful Fantastic Four First Steps movie. Or could you say the Fantastic Four movie? And we will talk about it, but we're going to do it in our next episode, premiering next Sunday. So be sure to subscribe to all of our platforms. Why don't you tell them again, my wonderful co host? Tell them where you can get
Okay,
us.
you can watch us on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts, and wherever fine podcasts are broadcast, you can find all the shows.
That's correct. You can find us, all the shows, on all those platforms, and we'll leave a link in the doobly dads below, where you can click, and go to those places and follow us, because that's the best way you're gonna know about, is, for example, you can get updates from us on if we plan to have an episode. You can hear us responding to you, like if you comment to us, we'll be sure to shout you guys out, if you're a follower. And so when you comment, hey, be sure to mention, hey, I'm following all the shows, and here's something I mentioned, things of that nature. And we're gonna keep trying to do that. And here's the thing. Um, we're pretty low key as people, as human beings. We're not very boisterous, but the more that you support our channel, the more that we can do for you. What does that mean? Well, that means, better quality editing. That means more, possibly merchandise that we can give to you guys at an affordable rate. Things like,
We can give you exclusive clips, and we can go to premieres and give you the scoop on movies before anybody else.
oh, that's right. Perhaps we can expand our little boutique podcast into news, and we can get a little journalism pass, and we can go in and we can talk to your favorite celebrities and say, hey, we're from all the shows, and our fans at all the shows would love to talk to you, right? So, and then just at a basic level, the more that you support our channel, the more accessibility we have. Like, for example, on YouTube, we need a minimum of 100 subscribers in order to access benefits like customizing the name of our channel more. If we are not at a certain follower rate, then the algorithm doesn't know to push our content and things of that nature. So please do support where you can by putting our podcast in your liked section. Be sure to subscribe to us wherever we are, wherever you prefer to get your podcast, and also comment. Give your thoughts. We want to know. We want to hear from you what your thoughts are on all the shows. And so we are really excited for that to grow and continue. And like we said in the beginning, we're gonna do a second episode next week, which is not usually what we would do. We're gonna do it on a bi-weekly basis. But in the next episode of all the shows, you can look forward to us talking about our not top fives, which, believe it or not, is actually going to be pretty fun, because we're going to talk about, some of the more memorable experiences we have in movies as well. And that comes from the not top fives. And we're going to talk about Fantastic Four, and some of the insider baseball. And, we didn't talk about the insider baseball of Superman either. So you're also going to get the insider baseball of Superman on this one. So we're going to talk about, what the potential sequels are of Superman. We're going to talk about, what the rumorings are on the news of, what James Gunn plans are for Superman in the future and things of that nature. So be staying tuned for that episode so you can hear all that plus more. You have anything else you want to add?
So I'm David, and
And I'm Sterling. And usually, at the end of this, we want to do a quick shout out what we call all the shout outs. So, in case there's anything that you want to shout out, feel free to do so. Maybe you can even rant here, you can rave, you can talk about whatever. This is sort of your time to shine, your minute of fame, or whatever you want to call it. So go ahead. Is there anything you want to shout out to the people?
I love superhero movies. If you do, leave a comment.
That's a good one. Hey, that's a double whammy right there. Well, I mean, my shout out is going to be to you, my dad. Thank you so much for helping me and teaching me how to be a good movie reviewer, even if we disagree about, what a good movie can be or whatever. We still have these moments that we can share together. So I
Well,
really
that's what makes
appreciate that.
review shows work, is that dialogue back and forth. I like this part. Well, I like that part. I didn't like that part.
Exactly, exactly. But there's more in common, and that's alike with us than disliked. So, I give a shout out to you. I also want to shout out my own personal channel, youtube.com/ at silversire. I'll leave that in the comments as well. You can contact me through that. I also have a Blue Sky, some other information. Be sure to click that YouTube channel button, and it will take you to my YouTube channel, which will have all my information where you can contact me. Whether that's Blue Sky or Instagram, whatever. And I'm setting up a bunch of different interesting videos on there. I'm going to be talking about Hearthstone, a card game. I'm going to be talking about some news things that happen in the gaming space. We're just going to be doing all kinds of things, and it's a new channel, so we're trying all different new things, and I would love to explore those new things with you. Now, how can we reach you, my wonderful father, David? How can we talk to you if we need to?
Oh, well, you can reach me through my website, davidraiklen.com, davidraiklen, or you can reach me at my email, raiklenmusic@gmail.com, raiklenmusic at gmail.
And you can reach out to both of us simultaneously. If you don't want to deal with all that nonsense, you can reach us both simultaneously with
It's
the
all the shows 010 at gmail.com. That's all ALL, the THE shows SHOWS 010 at Gmail.
And that is where, in the future, if there's any, business that you'd like to solicit to us, potentially not crypto scams, but other types of things, like perhaps you too can be featured in this show if you'd like to sponsor a
You
product.
want Crypto the dog, not Crypto the scam.
Yes, yes, exactly. We prefer the super cryptos, not the bad cryptos. But perhaps you at home have a product or service that you'd like to promote. And of course, these lights are not free. These microphones and these recording devices, they don't come cheap. So at some point, we will need to sully this channel with some sponsorships from time to time, but we will make sure they are ethical, and we're going to, do our research on them and all that good stuff to make sure that you, the viewer, get a good sponsorship and not just some random one. But if you'd like to reach us to comment as well, give a recommendation, maybe you want to improve the show, you can give us a message through that email at all the shows 010 at gmail.com. Yes, I do apologize. The numbers got all mixed up there. But yes, that is another avenue. You could comment on YouTube. You can reach us out on Spotify and these other channels. But we are going to check the email as well. So you're welcome to do that too. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything. Like I
Yes, it
said,
is.
st-
And this was a big, full episode. I think that the Fantastic Four will, be a much more compact episode because we've kind of gotten down what we like to talk about, and
and we're
because
going
we're
to
just
jump right
going
into it.
to one movie instead of, 12 or 15 or however
Yeah,
many
yeah,
we
yeah,
do.
and as my, my co-host, rightly mentioned, you don't wanna talk about bad movies too much, but we will briefly mention, some examples, and we'll just kind of, show that, as you guys, should know what we don't like about a movie sometimes as well, but, that'll be very quick as well. We're gonna try and make it fast, but yeah, so that's all for now. We don't have an intro phrase yet, we'll work on it, but, stay tuned for next time on All the Shows. Bye for now. Bye for now.